He told Henry Ashworth that his wife was the kind of woman who meant well, but hadn't the head for anything that mattered. He said it at the club, on a Tuesday in November, with a glass of port in one hand and the easy confidence of a man who had never once considered that his words might travel. He said it lightly, the way men say things they believe to be self-evident, and Henry laughed, and someone else nodded, and that was the end of it, as far as Elliot Vane was concerned. Nora was at home. She had been at home when he left, arranging dried herbs in the still room off the kitchen, her sleeves rolled to the elbows, her hair pinned back without vanity. She had learned, in 2 years of marriage, not to expect him to say goodbye when he went out. He didn't mean anything by it. That was simply how he moved through rooms. Efficiently, without sentiment, in the direction of whatever required him next. She had learned a great many things in 2 years. She had learned that Elliot took his coffee without sugar and his opinions without qualification. That he found prolonged conversation at dinner fatiguing. That he respected competence quietly, and expected it loudly, that he slept on the left side of the bed, and that she had begun, without noticing, to keep herself to the right with the precise discipline of a woman who understood her allotted space. She had learned, too, that the tenants of Vane's Crossing, the 40-odd families who farmed the land surrounding Harwick Hall, had not seen the east drainage ditch repaired in 6 years, that the roof of the mill cottage leaked badly enough to have ruined 2 successive harvests for the Denning family, and that the man Elliot had hired to manage the estate accounts had been padding them quietly for the better part of a year and a half. She had not been asked to learn any of this. She had simply paid attention. The marriage had been her father's idea, in the way that most of the ideas in Nora's life had been her father's ideas, presented as reasonable, settled upon before she had the chance to form a full objection, and accompanied by that particular look of his that managed to communicate both affection and finality in the same expression. Reginald Sutton had been a practical man. He had loved his daughter practically, which meant he had arranged her future with more care than consultation. Elliot Vane was 31 to her 23. He had a good name, a productive estate, and no scandal worth mentioning. He had, her father said, serious eyes. Nora had stood in the drawing room of her family home and looked at those eyes across the tea tray and thought, this is a man who has already decided what he thinks of things. She had not known then whether she was one of the things, or whether she was something altogether outside the category of things he considered. She found out slowly. They were married in April. The ceremony was brief, and the weather was uncertain, which Nora took as neither omen nor promise, only weather. Elliot had placed the ring on her finger with the focus of a man completing a task, and when he looked at her afterward, she had the odd sensation that he was relieved. Something was finished, rather than glad something had begun. The first months were not unkind, they were simply measured. Elliot kept to his study in the mornings and his accounts in the afternoons. He appeared at dinner and conversed adequately about tenants, politics, and the condition of the autumn barley. He was not cold. He was not cruel. He was the temperature of a room that no one had thought to warm. Nora had been raised in a house full of noise. Her father's opinions, her younger sister's music, the constant coming and going of neighbors who treated the Sutton parlor as an informal public house. She had not known, until she came to Harwick Hall, how loud silence could be. She furnished it, the silence. She found that it was easier to fill than to mourn. She took over the household accounts from Mrs. Farnley, the housekeeper, who was 63 and grateful. She catalogued the estate library, which had been in disorder since Elliot's father's time. She visited the tenants, first with Mrs. Farnley, then alone, because she found she was better at listening without the housekeeper present, and people said more when they weren't conscious of being reported. The Dennings told her about the mill cottage. Old Warren Holt told her about the drainage ditch. A woman named Bess, who had 3 children and a husband with a bad knee, told her that the man who came round to collect rents, a Mr. Partridge, had taken extra in November and called it a winter assessment that no one could find any record of. Nora came home from that visit and stood in the entrance hall for a moment, with her coat still buttoned and her gloves still on. Then she went to the estate office and spent 4 hours with the ledgers. She did not tell Elliot what she found. Not yet. She needed to be certain. She also needed, though she would not have said this aloud, to be the one who had been certain first, before anyone could reframe it as her having misunderstood. It was the Ashworth dinner that changed something, though she didn't know it at the time. Henry Ashworth had a wife named Frances who laughed too easily and felt too much about everything and was, in Nora's private assessment, the most genuinely kind person she had encountered in the neighborhood. Frances Ashworth touched your arm when she spoke to you. She remembered the names of your siblings. She served lemon cake because she knew that Nora had mentioned it once in passing, 6 months ago, and she had simply remembered. The dinner was 12 people around a long table, and candles burning low by the time the port came out. Nora was seated between old Dr. Pembury and a younger man named Samuel Fitch, who had come up from Bath to advise the Ashworths on some legal matter and stayed, as people sometimes did, because he was pleasant company and the countryside suited him. Samuel Fitch was easy to talk to. That was the word for it. Easy. He asked questions that assumed she had things worth saying, and when she answered he didn't glance toward Elliot to see if the answer was acceptable. He talked about the problem of tenant protections under current land law with the assumption that she had views on it, and she did have views on it, as it happened. And they talked for 40 minutes with the candles burning lower, and the other conversations blurring into background. She was laughing at something, a dry observation he had made about the county magistrate, when she became aware that Elliot was watching her from across the table. She did not know how long he had been watching. His face was composed. It was always composed. But there was something in the quality of his attention that she had not felt directed at her before, a kind of assessment that was different from his usual inventory taking, and she could not immediately name what it was. She looked away first. She reached for her water glass. She felt, obscurely, that she had done nothing wrong, which made the feeling of being observed all the stranger. In the carriage home, Elliot said nothing for some time. Then he said, "You seem to enjoy yourself." "Yes," she said. "It was a good evening." He nodded, as though confirming something he had already decided. She waited for him to say more. He didn't. She was in the walled garden in early December, when Mrs. Farnley came to find her with a face that meant trouble had arrived in an organized form. The letter was from Partridge's own solicitor, preemptive and defensive in tone, which meant Partridge already knew what she had found, and had chosen aggression over apology. He had written to Elliot, not to her. He had described the discrepancy as a bookkeeping error and suggested, in careful language that meant something else entirely, that the error had been introduced by a recent change in how the accounts were being managed, meaning her. She read the letter twice. Then she went inside and laid it on the desk in the estate office, alongside the 3 pages of her own accounting she had spent the past 6 weeks compiling. She sat down, folded her hands, and waited. Elliot came in at 4:30. He read Partridge's letter. He read her pages. He was quiet for a long time. "You've been working on this for 6 weeks, he said finally. It wasn't a question. Yes. Without telling me. I wanted to be certain before I brought it to you. I didn't want to accuse someone on a suspicion. He set the pages down with care. The east drainage has been your doing as well. Again, not a question. The Dennings lost 2 harvests to standing water, she said. I asked Cooper's men to assess it. The work wasn't expensive. He looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at the desk. She had the impression he was choosing his next sentence carefully, the way he chose everything, methodically, with an eye toward not being wrong. I should have been told, he said. Yes, she said. You should have. She did not say. And I should have been asked. She did not say, there is a great deal you have not thought to tell me either, including what you said at the club in November, which Francis Ashworth mentioned last week, with the careful tact of someone doing a kindness they hope won't be necessary. She did not say any of this because she had been raised to pick her battles, and she had been deciding, for several months now, which battle mattered. She left him with the pages and went to dress for dinner. He let Partridge go the following week, quietly, without drama, with a settlement that reflected guilt without advertising it. He did not tell Nora about the settlement. She found out through Mrs. Farnley, who found out through the kitchen, which found out through Partridge's housemaid, who had been glad to see him go. He did not thank her. She had not expected him to, but she noticed the absence of it in the way you notice a draft, not dramatically, just a persistent awareness of a gap where warmth should be. She had been at Harwick Hall for 2 years by then. 2 years of silent competence, of managed rooms and steady accounts, and learning the names of every tenant, and the particular conditions of every parcel of land, and the way to speak to old Warren Holt, so that he would actually tell you what was wrong, instead of saying everything was fine. 2 years of dinners that ended early and mornings that began in separate rooms, and the careful cohabitation of 2 people who had been introduced to each other as husband and wife, and had been working out, ever since, whether that meant anything further. She had thought when she first came that it would develop into something, that proximity and shared interest would eventually become warmth. She had given it time, she had given it patience. She had given it the particular sustained effort of a woman who had decided to make the best of a situation, and discovered, gradually, that making the best of something is not the same as being content with it. She was not content. She had been avoiding the full weight of this fact, the way you avoid pressing on a bruise. Aware of it, careful around it, not quite ready to inventory the damage. But standing in the upstairs corridor one evening in January, with a lamp in one hand, and the sound of rain on the roof, and no particular destination ahead of her, she pressed and felt the full extent of it, and stood very still for a moment. She had no allies here. Frances Ashworth was kind, but Frances was Henry's wife first, and Henry was Elliot's oldest friend, and there were allegiances that would hold against sentiment. Her sister Maud was in Edinburgh with her husband, and wrote cheerful letters that contained no room for unhappiness. Her father was gone, 3 months now, quietly, the way he had done most things. She had taken the news in Elliot's study with Elliot in the room, and he had said that he was sorry, and he had meant it in the particular way that men mean things they cannot quite reach. She stood in the corridor for a long time. Then she made a decision. She did not announce the decision. That would have required an audience, and she did not want one. She wrote to her aunt in Bristol, her father's sister, Constance's mother, had a house of moderate size and immoderate opinions, and had been asking Nora for 2 years to come and stay. Nora wrote that she would like to come for the spring, if it was convenient. Her aunt wrote back by return post that it was wildly convenient, and when was she coming? She told Elliot at breakfast on a Wednesday. He was reading the Agricultural Gazette. She poured her tea and said, without preliminary, "I am going to Bristol in March. To visit my aunt. I'll be gone some weeks." He looked up. "How many weeks?" "I'm not certain yet." He looked at her for a moment, and she returned the look with a steadiness she had been practicing, without knowing it, for some time. He said, "I see." Then he returned to the Gazette. She went to Bristol in March. She had been there for 3 weeks when she understood that she had not been on a visit. She had been on a reckoning. Her Aunt Constance was 70 and sharp as a winter morning, and had buried one husband, and outlasted a second, and had views on every subject, which she delivered with the cheerful certainty of a woman who had stopped worrying about agreement. She fed Nora well and made her walk every day, and asked very direct questions, and listened to the answers without offering solutions, which was the most useful thing anyone had done for her in 2 years. "He is not a bad man," Nora said one evening, by the fire, in the way that people say things they have been thinking for a long time. "No," her aunt said, "but being not bad is the beginning of an argument, not the end of one. I don't know if I want to go back." Her aunt put her knitting down and looked at her. "Do you know what you want?" Nora thought about it honestly. "I want to feel like what I do is seen. Not rewarded, not praised, just seen." Her aunt picked her knitting back up. "That seems like a reasonable thing to want." She stayed for 8 weeks. She was arranging her trunk for the return journey on a Thursday morning when the letter arrived. It was from Frances Ashworth, which was unusual, because Frances communicated most things in person, and used correspondence for matters of some weight. The letter said that Henry had told her, recently, under the circumstances that Frances had not specified but Nora understood perfectly, what Elliot had said at the club in November. Frances had been sitting with the knowledge for months, trying to decide whether telling Nora was a kindness or an interference. She had decided it was a kindness. She was sorry if it was not. The letter described what he had said precisely. Nora read it once. Then she sat down on the edge of the trunk and looked out the window at the Bristol rooftops and the grey May sky. She had suspected. Frances's careful manner in the months since November had been a kind of communication. She now saw. Not concealment but hesitation. The hesitation of someone who cared about the outcome and wasn't sure of the method. She could not be angry at Frances. She could be angry. She sat with that for a while. She had not let herself be properly angry in some time, because anger required energy she had been directing elsewhere, and it also required a specific kind of clarity about what you wanted that she hadn't been certain she possessed. She possessed it now. The anger helped with that, actually. It was usefully clarifying. She did not repack her trunk with intention or drama. She simply finished what she had been doing. But when she wrote to Elliot to say she was returning, she did not give him a date. She arrived on a Friday afternoon in the second week of May. The house was the same. The gravel on the drive was freshly raked, which meant Mrs. Farnley knew she was coming, even if the date had been uncertain. The elms at the north side of the kitchen garden had leafed out fully. The light in the front windows was afternoon gold. Elliot came out to meet her carriage. She did not know whether he had been watching for it or had simply happened to be near the door. He looked. She studied him. While she was still in the carriage, he looked as he had something he intended to say and was arranging the order of it. He helped her down without being asked. He did not let go of her hand immediately. "I'm glad you're back," he said. "Are you?" she said. It was not quite a question. He heard the difference. She saw him register it, a small adjustment in his expression, the kind of adjustment that means a man is recalibrating faster than he is comfortable with. "I owe you something," he said. "Several things." "Yes," she said. "You do." She went inside. He followed. The conversation that happened that evening was not the conversation she had been rehearsing on the coach road from Bristol. It was quieter than that, less structured. It had the quality of something that had been waiting in the walls of the house for 2 years, and had finally, without either of them quite deciding to open the door, come through. He told her what he had said at the club. She had not asked. He told her anyway, in the flat, precise way he told things he was ashamed of, and she listened without helping him. He did not deserve to be helped through it. He told her that he had not understood, when he said it, that it was a thing she would hear. That this, he acknowledged before she could say it, was not a defense. That the understanding she was competent had arrived only after he had seen the competence, and seen. This he said more slowly, with the look of a man who was finding honesty harder than accuracy, what it cost her to exercise it in a house that hadn't asked her to. "I watched you work for 2 years, he said, and I watched it as a man watches something from a window. As though it wasn't happening in the same house as me. I don't know when I started doing that. I don't have a good reason for it." "No," she said, "you don't." The fire had burned low by then. She did not move to add wood, neither did he. "I would like to start again," he said finally. "You can't start again," she said. "You start from here." He was quiet. "Yes. From here then." She looked at him in the low light, and thought, this is a man who has spent his whole life being accurate about everything and is now, for the first time, trying to be honest. And they are not the same thing, and he knows that now, and it is costing him. She was not sure yet whether cost was enough. She was not sure yet what was enough. She thought that probably she would need to find out, and that finding out would require time, and that she was, on balance, willing to give that time. She had always been better at patience than she was comfortable admitting. "Then we start from here," she said. May passed into June. June passed into July. The Aldwych Summer Assembly was the first public occasion they attended together, as something that, for the first time, felt like together. The room was familiar, the same long hall, the same 3 chandeliers that Nora had always thought were 1 chandelier too many, the same arrangement of chairs around the perimeter that no one ever used. But Elliot, when they entered, did not walk toward the men's corner by the windows and leave her to arrange herself socially. He stayed beside her. He introduced her to people she had met before, but this time with a specificity she hadn't heard from him before. "Not merely my wife, but Nora is the one who found the partridge matter, and you should speak to Nora about it. She knows the drainage situation better than anyone." And once, to old Dr. Pembury, with something that wasn't quite pride, but was the thing that lives next door to it. "She's the one who's been keeping this estate in order for 2 years, while I was busy being certain I had it managed." Dr. Pembury shook his head, which meant he had heard some version of this already and had opinions about it. Francis Ashworth, standing nearby, looked at Nora over the rim of her glass with the satisfied expression of a woman who had been waiting for this and was glad to see it. Nora said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "I had a good deal of help from Mrs. Farnley." "You're being generous," Elliot said. "I'm being accurate," she said. He looked at her. Something passed through his expression that she was, slowly, beginning to be able to read. "We'll argue about it later," he said. "Yes," she said. "We will." Later that evening, standing in the warm press of the assembly hall, with the fiddles going and the room bright, she became aware of his hand at her back. Light, unpressured, the hand of a man who was not certain of his welcome but was trying. She did not move away. It was not forgiveness. Forgiveness was a longer road than one summer evening could cover, and she knew it and suspected he knew it now too. But it was something. The beginning of a something that was not already decided. Outside, the July dark was warm and the drive home was shorter than she remembered, and when the house came into view at the end of the lane, the windows were lit. She had asked Mrs. Farnley to keep them lit. She had gotten in the habit, these past months, of making sure the house looked like someone lived in it. It did now. She thought that was probably the most honest thing she could say about where they were. It did.